Luigi Mangione is back in court this week, and I'll say up front, I view this defendant as a dead man walking after what he did. He'll be tried in federal court eventually, where he'll be sentenced to death for the premeditated murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, unless his defense can prove the legal standard of insanity, which I don't think they can. Now, this week, Mangione is in court on the state's criminal case, New York State, which has no death penalty, but the state gets the first crack at Mangione, and his defense includes the lawyer who got Sean Diddy Combs acquitted of the more serious charges in his sex trafficking trial, Mark Agnifilo. So this week, it's a hearing to try to suppress evidence obtained by police during Mangione's arrest at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania last year, December 9th, 2024. Now, that evidence includes the backpack where he carried around his written manifesto, which described his reasons for stalking and killing Brian Thompson. The manifesto says Mangione wanted to spread a message and win public support about everything wrong with our health system. Now, one entry apparently says, "I finally feel confident about what I will do. The target is insurance. It checks every box." Now, that type of manifesto, which shows his planning and justifications, would undermine an insanity defense. So his lawyers want to get it thrown out, and they want to throw out the gun that he used. But they have him on video killing Brian Thompson, so the prosecution can go forward even without the murder weapon, in my view. Now, they also want to suppress any type of non-in-person identification, so that's aimed at the video of him committing the murder. And the defense wants to suppress some of his statements to police as well. Now, when the police arrived at the McDonald's, they spoke to him for 19 minutes before reading him his Miranda rights. Now, those 19 minutes of statements are at issue in the suppression hearing. He said that his name was Mark Rosario. He showed a fake ID. Asked if he was visiting family in the area, he claimed to be homeless. But this is a rich guy whose family's net worth is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, so within the top 0.3% of wealth in America. Now, police asked if he had recently been in New York. He said no, although he had stalked Brian Thompson to New York and shot him there. Now, after the police found the ID was fake, they told him he would be arrested if he lied about his identity again, at which point he gave his real name. Asked why he had lied, he said, "I clearly should not have, and that was the ID I had in my wallet." Now, the defense could use the suppression hearing this week as a dry run, so to speak, because they'll have to do it all over again in federal court, where they need to prove insanity to avoid the death penalty. Now, the state charges don't carry the death penalty, but they might try to prove it in state court as well to avoid conflicting defenses, unless they can get a curative instruction in the federal case to prohibit jurors from considering why he didn't claim to be insane on the state murder charges as well. So a big issue is the defense missed the purported deadlines for filing a notice of insanity defense or psychological defense in both state and federal courts. But my feeling is we will see the insanity defense play out. Now, the deadline to file was October 10th in the federal case, but under the federal rules, they can late file with good cause. So the judge probably will allow the late notice, and to avoid prejudice to federal prosecutors' ability to counter the evidence of alleged insanity, the judge will give prosecutors additional time to find a psychiatrist to examine Mangione before trial. Now, the reason for the leniency is the judge wants to give the defendant every appearance of fairness because it's a death penalty case. There will be appeals, and these defense lawyers know how to argue manifest injustice from being denied the opportunity to late file, etc. Although I believe manifest injustice looks a lot like this. But I digress. Now, the defense also filed a motion to dismiss the death penalty eligible charges in the federal case, namely cyber stalking and murder with a firearm, but the defense probably won't get anywhere with that motion. The DOJ's opposition brief was just too strong. Next, the fall of a once great power. The Washington Post, once mighty, is now peddling conspiracy theories. Let's listen to their podcast.
The order from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was simple: kill them all. Officials told Post reporters about Hegseth's order to strike a boat in the Caribbean, And according to our exclusive reporting, that order became the opening salvo in the Trump administration's war on alleged drug traffickers coming from Venezuela. Now legal experts say the command from Hegseth may be more than just an aggressive military action. It could be considered a war crime, or even murder.
Quoting anonymous sources, the Washington Post accuses Hegseth of a war crime. On September 2nd of this year, Hegseth ordered a strike on a Venezuelan drug boat, but lo and behold, the newspaper asserts, there were 2 survivors. Hegseth allegedly told his team, no survivors, kill everybody. Then a second strike was launched, allegedly for the sole purpose of killing survivors, which would be a clear violation of the laws of armed conflict. You don't fire on shipwrecked sailors who are no longer fighting, according to the Department of War's Law Manual and the Geneva Convention, among other sources. But as it turns out, Hegseth never ordered the second strike, never said no survivors, never said kill everybody. Admiral Bradley, a former Navy SEAL, was in charge of the operation. It was a SEAL Team 6 operation, and Bradley was well within the law of armed conflict and his authority when he ordered the second strike because the drug boat hadn't been destroyed in the first strike. It was merely disabled. Now, firing on a disabled vessel is permitted by the laws of armed conflict, so Bradley ordered several additional strikes. Now, there was no war crime targeting enemies helplessly treading water, as the fictional narrative goes. Secretary Hegseth has announced his full support for Admiral Bradley's decision and says he and President Trump have his back. So one of the main questions in this story is, how did the Washington Post start peddling conspiracy theories, which even Mark Kelly and Ted Lieu had to qualify as possibly false reporting? Let's listen to their takes.
Well, if orders are illegal, not only do they not have to follow them, they are legally required not to follow them.
Do you think that constitutes an illegal
order? I think there
order?
needs to be an investigation, and I hope that the reporting is not accurate. I care so much about the United States Navy and those service members. This was an operation involving the most professional members of the military, U.S. Navy SEALs, who I revere. I hope and pray that this is not true.
Now I'd like to talk about war crimes.
So Kelly comes off as circumspect. He says he hopes and prays it's not true, but let's listen to Ted Lieu.
Last week, Secretary Hegseth lied and denied media reports that the U.S. military ordered a second strike on defenseless shipwrecked survivors. Then yesterday, both the White House and Hegseth said actually it was Admiral Bradley who ordered the second strike. I served on active duty as a JAG for 4 years and then an additional 21 years in the reserves. And let me be very clear, killing shipwreck survivors is a war crime. The Department of Justice must conduct an investigation into the war crime and hold all those accountable, including Secretary Hegseth. He allegedly said, quote, kill them all.
Okay, 20 years as a JAG, and he declares Hegseth lied and declares a war crime occurred, although he can't know that firsthand. How sad for him, especially as a former JAG. But he knew enough not to take part in Mark Kelly's sedition inciting video last week. Let's take a look. Starring the seditious six, ex-service members and current members of Congress who urged the CIA and U.S. military to ignore President Trump's quote-unquote illegal orders. Now, they didn't specify in their video which orders are supposed to be illegal and didn't disclose the potential death penalty for soldiers who guessed wrong about which orders turn out to be illegal. No mention of that small detail. Now, I posted a video about the seditious six a little while ago. Now, the New York Times, which is no friend of the Trump administration, exposed the Washington Post's false reporting by citing 5 U.S. officials who say Secretary Hegseth never ordered a second strike. Now, it occurs to me that the Seditious Six video might have tickled the imagination of anonymous sources because it seems they wanted to damage Hegseth. Now, this is after the War Department ordered an investigation into Mark Kelly for the video. Now, Kelly retired from the Navy with a pension, so he can be recalled to active duty and court-martialed. Just to conclude with some good news, a Republican, Matt Van Epps, held off a challenge from a progressive named Afton Bain in a special election in Tennessee. They call her the AOC of Tennessee. Now, Van Epps is a West Point grad who served on active duty for 10 years as an Army helicopter pilot. He campaigned on President Trump's platform and with his endorsement with a focus on economics, border security, protecting girls' sports, reforming the VA, and energy independence. Now, his opponent is already looking ahead to the midterm. She's anti-police and anti-Nashville, quoted as saying she hates Nashville, although parts of Nashville are within the district she was campaigning to represent. So, a progressive strategy, but there weren't enough voters in Nashville who hate Nashville. Maybe she could move to Minnesota or New York City, where hating the culture of the place you're campaigning to represent might get you elected. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe.